The Velvet Bar Café on the corner of 8th and Willow pretends it has always been there. It wears its age like perfume, polished wood, a brass rail rubbed to a warm dim by 1,000 passing hands, windows that blush in the rain. If you glance quickly, you might miss the way the light gathers in the corners, as if someone is whispering there. On afternoons like this one, the city tilts toward dusk, and the room fills with the sound of spoons and the soft breath of steam. I have always liked the way time slows in here, like a courteous host who insists you stay for one more minute. We used to meet at the second table from the window. Not because it was hidden, this cafe has no dark corners, but because the window gave us a frame. We could look out and pretend that everything beyond the glass was larger than us, that the world, bustling and rehearsed, would carry our secrets and set them down somewhere far away. The staff knew us as colleagues who drank the same drinks in the same low voices. If our laughing occasionally arrived late and too bright for the hour, no one seemed to notice. I had arrived early that last day. The rain made me feel like a conspirator with the weather. Coats, navy, charcoal, camel, bloomed on hooks by the door, some shaking off droplets that darkened the wood. I ordered the cinnamon cappuccino he always teased me for, and when the cup arrived, it was dusted as perfectly as a first snowfall. The mouth of the cup was too hot at first. I watched the steam lift and dissipate, and felt the hollow where anticipation usually sits. He must have slipped in while I was turned toward the window. He did that, appeared, as if discovering me rather than joining me. When I looked up for him, I found the envelope instead. It lay on the table with a surprisingly delicate presence, as if it had arrived by wind rather than hand. Beige, thin, final. My name was not on it. The way the paper caught the amber light made me think of a photograph more than a letter. A capture of a moment, sealed. He came back from the counter with his coffee and stopped. Just the slightest beat, as if surprised to see something he had placed there himself. I knew the beat. I'd learned to measure whole seasons in the rhythms of his hesitation. "You knew this would come," he said. He sat, and the chair gave a small sigh. Maybe I did know. The months had been soft and tangled as the fringe of a scarf, and yet we had always been careful not to pull too hard. We had made a devotion out of gentleness, as if kindness could be a way of not lying. "Of course," I said. "We were always just a season, weren't we?" He smiled in that way that made me forgive him before I had a reason. We did not touch right away. The cafe was not loud, but it was full enough. The rain performed its steady theatre on the window. At the bar, a couple negotiated the purchase of a pastry they would later break into deliberate halves. A woman at the window traced something on her phone with a finger that hovered instead of landed, the way birds do. He looked better in autumn. Some people belong to certain light, and his belonged to the gold that arrives after a rain. He warmed it. It held him up. When we met in spring, he had looked bright, eager, a freshly ironed version of himself. In summer, the heat gave him a carelessness that did not fit, and he struggled to wear it. But in autumn he seemed true, a little tired in an honourable way, a man holding his breath to make the inevitable quieter. We could have done what we always did, traded sentences like smooth stones, given names to the shade of the trees on Willow, tested our balance on the beam between confession and restraint. but the envelope changed the physics of the table. I could feel it the way a person feels a distant train, not as a sound, but as a moving pressure through the bones. He reached, hesitated, and then let his hand rest over mine. It was nearly nothing, the way our palms met. Even now, I am not sure whether we touched, or whether memory has added that to spare me. Heat rose, then steadied, a small lap of warmth like tea when the first sip no longer burns. I didn't look down. If I watched our hands, I would begin to narrate it, make meanings I was not brave enough to live. "If I stay," he said, "someone will get hurt." His voice was low and polished with use, a phrase we had handled often, tried on from different angles. We had shaped it into a principle to keep us from becoming smaller people. I had always loved that about us, our insistence that tenderness could be a structure, not a weakness, that it could hold two stories at once and not tear. Outside, a gust of wind cast a confetti of leaves across the glass. They stuck for a second, as if considering us, and then slipped away. The room's warmth felt like a permission I could no longer accept. I pulled my hand back and straightened a napkin that did not need straightening. "Do you remember the first afternoon?" I asked. His mouth answered before his eyes did. "You were early then, too." "You were late," I said, smiling because it was kinder than the truth. "I waited around the corner," he confessed. "I was trying to decide whether to be brave." "And?" "I chose you," he said softly. "And in choosing, I chose the hour. And in choosing the hour, I chose the end." I could have told him that he makes poetry when he is trying to be practical. I could have said that victory, here, would look like a lack of regret. I could have done so many clever, considerate things. Instead, I picked up the envelope and weighed it in my hand. "What is it?" I asked. Not because I did not know, but because naming changes the shape of a thing. "A promise I can't keep," he said, "or the proof that I tried to." He hadn't written my name. He hadn't written his. The flap was unlicked. The implication was simple. I could open it anywhere in the world and it would still belong to us, and still not belong to us at all. The clock above the counter struck 3. The sound was smaller than it used to be, and that made me ache. How many times had we sat beneath that sound and pretended not to count? The hour folded over us like a coat being put away. He stood first. He did that for me, the granting of the first quiet. He slid his chair back with care, gathered his gloves, tucked his hands into them without looking, like a magician making a coin disappear without wanting applause. He glanced at the window. I followed his gaze and saw our dull reflections, not holding hands, not tragic, just two people practicing a skill. How to leave without injuring the room. "I won't write," he said, and this felt like the kindest sentence anyone had ever given me. "I won't wait," I answered, because kindness must travel both ways or not at all. He touched 2 fingers to the envelope and then withdrew them, a benediction withheld to keep it holy. He nodded, as if to the hour itself, and then he walked to the door. The bell above it made a bright sound as if from a smaller, younger world. I watched him cross the street. He lifted his collar against the rain. I thought of how many versions of a man a collar can make. Dignified, furtive, cinematic, late. He turned left and the mist took him back. I set the envelope down the way one sets down a white stone to mark a path back from the woods. I did not open it. I cupped my hands around the cappuccino and took the first real sip of the afternoon. It was too cool now, and too sweet, and somehow exactly right for the moment. I finished it slowly, then stood, folded my scarf with the concentration one gives to ritual, and left. The weeks after were tidy. I gave myself small tasks: laundry, jasmine for the kitchen windowsill, mending the pocket of the wool coat I had promised to mend last winter. I walked differently, slower, not because I was sad, but because the city had new edges and I wanted to feel where my hands might catch. People say you can tell the quality of a person by the way they leave a room. I think you can also tell by the way they hold the doorknob as they leave. Some doors invite a flourish. Mine clicked softly shut behind me each morning, like the last word of a letter written by someone polite. I kept the envelope in a drawer with concert tickets and photographs. I would touch it sometimes, not often, just to confirm it was not a story I had invented. On certain nights, I'd sit at the small table by my own window and press it under my palm, feeling the mild resistance of paper against wood, the friction of things unspoken. If you do this long enough, the envelope becomes a kind of instrument. You can hear what's inside without opening it. You can summon the faint shuffle of a letter against its own fold, the breath of a page in a room where a radiator hums. It plays the key of restraint. Winter came clean and legitimate, and the café put out a tin of peppermint candies near the register. I avoided 8th and Willow, not out of superstition. I have never been ruled by the kind of magic that insists on omens, but out of gratitude. It felt right to give that corner back to other stories, other hands. The city needs to be a commons. Once, on a bus, I saw a man with an umbrella I recognised. Black, with a curved wooden handle, a tiny chip where it would rest against a table edge. My heart bowed to the recognition like a person to a monarch, and then straightened when he turned and I saw a stranger's mouth. The relief was oddly gracious. We deserve, sometimes, to be wrong about what we see. It lets us return to our lives equipped with the knowledge that at least some illusions are gentle. In early spring, the light changed its mind. The mornings began to lace the room with yellow thread, not so much warming it as proposing a future warmth. I decided to open the envelope, not because I wanted the contents, but because I wanted the opening. The act seemed ceremonial. I brewed coffee that smelled like childhood. My father always said the first cup is the truest version of who you are in the day, and set the envelope on the table. I slid a butter knife along the unsealed edge. Inside, a single photograph. It was the café. It must have been taken from outside, across the street, in late afternoon. The rain left soft commas along the glass, punctuation for a sentence no one had yet decided to write. Through the window, the second table showed itself, haloed by the golden carnivals that lamps sometimes make in rooms like that. I was there in the picture. My silhouette leaned slightly forward, hand poised above a cup. You could not see my face. There was only the idea of it, tipped toward listening. I stood for a long moment holding the photograph by its corners. A warmth rose behind my ribs, Not heat precisely, but the lifting of something that had slept and was now stretching. I understood then what he had meant by promise and by proof. He had given me a way to confirm that what we had was real, without asking me to keep it. He had left me evidence that did not demand an answer. On the back, in small, patient writing, a single line. Some seasons give you back your name. I laughed, which startled me. Laughter alone can feel like sunlight and embarrassment at once. Do you know the pleasure of recognizing your own handwriting on a form you filled out ages ago? It was like that. The photograph did not ask anything. It relieved me of the need to keep rehearsing our careful reasons. He had not written his name, and that was the kindness that made the rest of the sentence possible. I placed the photograph on the sill and watched the steam from my coffee tilt toward it and then harmlessly vanish. The envelope, now only paper, seemed suddenly heavier with air than with content. I slipped it back into the drawer with the tickets and the other lives I had briefly attended. For a week, I left the photograph where it was. Then I moved it to the inside of a book I loved as a girl. That is where you put things that deserve both privacy and proximity. Summer, which had always made us clumsy, arrived with a compact. I inked a line through my calendar and took the train to a coastal town that smelled like lemons and rope. On the second morning, I walked the cliff path before the beach woke up. The sea had not yet remembered its performance. It lay there like a creature that trusted the weather. A café sat above the harbour. Whitewashed walls, blue chairs, the kind of charm that announces itself and dares you to resent it. I ordered coffee I could not pronounce correctly and did not care. I took the photograph from my purse and set it on the table. I do not believe in writing letters to the past. I do believe in listening. The photograph made a soft sound against the wood, like the throat clearing before a good story. The air smelled of citrus and salt. Somewhere behind me, a radio tested a song that had loved me once and then forgotten me. I traced the edge of the image with one finger. If anyone watched me, they would think I was simply a person who had brought something fragile to the edge of the sea. And that was true. You might expect an epiphany here, a bird that lands on the railing and chooses me, a sudden absolution that makes the horizon wider. But what I felt was smaller and more accurate. I felt spacious in an ordinary way, as if a drawer had been reorganized and would close without a nudge. I drank the coffee and let the heat gather at the back of my throat. When the cup was empty, I leaned back and let my eyes blur until the world became colours with kind opinions about each other. A man at the next table asked, in gentle tourist's English, whether I would like him to take a picture of me with the view. I said no thank you, and he bowed a little, as if he had offered me something to carry, and I had wisely chosen to travel light. He returned to his book. I returned the photograph to my bag. On the walk back, I thought of the envelope again. Not of what I had found in it, but of the gesture itself. We spend so much of our lives writing to be understood, to persuade, to be forgiven, to be named. He had written to give me back what does not require writing, the authority to end a story with a quiet that feels earned. That autumn, months later, the city wore its familiar gold. I passed the café at 8th and Willow. The windows were clear as a polished conscience. Inside, a woman alone lifted a cup and closed her eyes for a second longer than necessary. The bell rang, and someone entered trailing cold air. That was our table, the second from the window. It belonged to the hour and the light, and to whomever had the good sense to sit with their back to the room and face the rain. I did not go in. The door wanted to be opened, but the moment did not. I stood across the street and let the scene become a moving still. Above me, leaves spun down like small mistakes forgiven in a language I did not speak but understood. I slid my hands into my coat pockets and found the edges of my own fingers, elegant and unastonished. I thought, not for the first time, that some endings are not conclusions, but climates. You arrive, and the air has its say, and you learn how to breathe there. You learn where to sit so the light does what you need it to. You learn to order the thing that is hot when you are cold, and sweet when you are bitter, and to take your time with it. And because it was a good day, and because it felt right to share a table with myself, I turned the corner and found another café with another window and ordered another cup. The cinnamon came like a memory I had earned. The first sip was perfect, and even if it wasn't, I decided it would be. Outside, the city rehearsed its weather, and inside, I rehearsed a smile no one needed to receive for it to matter. I lifted the cup and said a private toast, not to him, not to the envelope, not to the photograph, but to the kindness of rooms that let you leave without a scene. Then I drank the last cup of autumn I owed to the past, and the first one I owed to myself.